So you're trying to navigate imposter syndrome, and you're not exactly sure what to do. For the sake of simplicity, let me assume that you're a college student, and that you're often comparing yourself to other students, maybe getting better grades than you, or receiving more awards and accomplishments than you are. And you're trying to think, how do you decrease some of the negative feelings? How do you decrease some of the anxiety that comes up when you're comparing yourself to these people? And the thing is, a lot of people think that they'll get rid of their imposter syndrome if they just start achieving more. So maybe if they bring their grades up, then they won't compare themselves to others anymore, and that this anxiety just won't exist anymore. But the problem with this is that even super high achievers can have lots of imposter syndrome. I can say personally that a lot of the highest achieving students I know, and some of the ones with even the best grades, are still constantly comparing themselves to others, whether at the same school or other schools. It doesn't really matter. People at all different levels of achievement, academic or otherwise, have this tendency to compare themselves to others who are doing better than them. And I think part of decreasing this anxiety, I think a good first step is just awareness. Because if we're not aware that other people feel the same way as we do, then it makes the whole situation a lot more stressful for us. If we feel like we're the only ones having this sensation, then it creates a lot more anxiety. But if we can acknowledge that even the really high performing students, even the people who are getting A's in all their classes and who are getting honors and valedictorians, they're all feeling these feelings too, I think that's really helpful to just take some of the pressure off and just help us to realize that we're not abnormal for feeling like this, because tons of other people do as well. And with that in mind, I want to share 2 tips that I've used throughout my years at college to kind of decrease these feelings of imposter syndrome and even motivate myself more, as opposed to just giving myself more anxiety. And I think the first mindset switch that can decrease this anxiety by a lot is to realize that we shouldn't be thinking about these people as your competition, but instead people that we can admire and look up to. So if you're constantly looking at these people who are getting better grades than you, and all you can think about is, oh, you know what, all the jobs I apply for, they're going to be more competitive and they're my competition, I won't be able to compete against them, then you're going to become very stressed out, because you're constantly just comparing yourself to these people who are outperforming you, and it's just not a useful comparison. But if you instead look at some of these really, really smart people with admiration, it takes a lot of the weight off your shoulder. So for example, if you think to yourself, you know what, like, I'm pretty smart, but this person here is really, really smart, and that's just awesome. That's so inspiring to see. Like, I don't want to compete with them, but maybe they can be my motivation. Maybe I can one day hope to sort of achieve these levels, as opposed to constantly thinking about how you measure up against them. In the same way as when someone first goes into the gym, if you were to walk up to someone benching, say, 315, and think, oh wow, this person's my competition. If I can't outlift this person, then there's fundamentally something wrong with me, or I'm at fault in some way. This is going to cause a lot of stress. But if you instead look at people like this with admiration and think, wow, that's so impressive, that's so awesome, one day I want to maybe achieve something like this, then it takes a lot of the stress off, and then at the same time motivates you, because you can see what other people are doing and you know what heights there are to achieve. And you think to yourself, let that be my motivation, let that be my drive, as opposed to someone I have to compete with right now. So that was the first tip. Start looking at people who outperform you with admiration, as opposed to constantly thinking that they're your competition. And the second thing to remember about imposter syndrome, and this isn't as much a mindset shift as it is just something to keep in mind, is that we're always more self-critical of ourselves than others. So when we're judging how we measure up against someone else, we know everything there is to know about ourselves. So we know everything about our shortcomings and areas where we're worse off than other people, but these people that you're constantly comparing yourself to when you feel this imposter syndrome, you know very little about their own insecurities and their own problems. So really any comparison you're making to these people is just silly. Because even though you might see these people as leagues above you and in a whole nother universe of intelligence, most likely they don't see themselves that way. I'll tell you now that a lot of really, really intelligent people I know, they're not going around all day thinking, oh my God, I'm so much smarter than everyone else. No, they're just as insecure. They have their own problems. Sure, maybe they're outperforming you in some of your classes and maybe they're getting better grades, but that's not something on their mind. A lot of these people aren't thinking about who they're outperforming because they have their own imposter syndrome and they're constantly comparing themselves to others. And this isn't to invalidate any feelings that you might be having, so I'm not saying that you're not justified to have imposter syndrome, because of course everyone experiences it to some extent. But what I am saying is that it is very important to realize that we are very, very self-critical of our own shortcomings, and we're not going to notice that stuff in others. So even though it might seem like someone you know at your school is the perfect student and they just have everything going for them, most likely they have a lot of their own problems, and they might even think the opposite about you. They might think you're the perfect student because they just don't know your intricacies. They don't know everything that's going on in your life, and neither do you about them. It's just not possible. So to summarize this point, you know everything about yourself, but you don't know everything about these people. And the idea of the perfect student simply doesn't exist. Even the people performing very well are constantly comparing themselves to others and have different stressors that you might not know about. But if you can become a bit more mindful of when feelings like this are coming up, and just keep in mind that it's important to view some of these highly performing people as something like motivation as opposed to your competition, and then just also remembering that you are a lot more self-critical of yourself than others, I think this can really help decrease some of this anxiety and just take a lot of the weight off your shoulders. So I really hope you find this useful. If you like videos like this on studying, productivity, mental health for college students, I really recommend you subscribe. There's going to be a whole lot more videos like this soon. But until then, I'll see you guys.